on the Jewish and democratic state of Israel. Those of us who seek to do good and need to be strong, those of us.
Well, he was nicknamed Sleepy Joe, and napping is good for you. All of this while, of course, a lot of people are waiting for the inevitable transfer of power to the next benevolent dictator, who, of course, is waiting in the shadows, waiting to seize the moment. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Luke Kudetsky. We are Change.org. Obviously, we started off with some facetiousness, but there's a lot of serious issues to get into, especially with the latest of what's happening with Afghanistan and its peoples. There's also some reprisals, as well as some very surprising news coming from France and Denmark. As of course, awe-stunning scenes like this played out through the streets of France, where protesters are on their 7th straight weekend of protests against mandatory domestic passports. The French president and former Rothschild banker Emmanuel Macron said that these people are in the minority, but by looking at a lot of these protest videos, it's hard to tell that, to be quite frank with you. In related leading the charge against insanity news, Denmark just announced that it will be stopping all restrictions, mandates, and lockdowns in 2 weeks, and they announced that they will stop classifying what's been going on for the last year and a half as a, quote, critical threat to society, as originally they had what was accused of as a lax approach towards this. The official numbers suggest that there... Surprising news coming from France and Denmark. As of course,
this right here, as soon as this plays.
awe-stunning scenes like this played out through the streets of France, where protesters are on their 7th.
All those people. This is the 7th weekend in a row.
Straight weekend of protests against mandatory domestic passports. The French president...
But that's not all.
And former Rothschild banker Emmanuel Macron said that these people are in the minority, but by looking at a lot of these protest videos, it's hard to tell that, to be quite frank with you. In related leading the charge against insanity news, Denmark just announced that it will be stopping all restrictions, mandates, and lockdowns in 2 weeks, and they announced that they will stop classifying what's been going on for the last year and a half as a, quote, critical threat to society, as originally they had what was accused of as a lax approach towards this. The official numbers suggest that their approach, along with the approach of Sweden, when it comes to the larger social and economic effects, that they are definitely doing the right thing and creating policies that are leading to less human harm. This, as we just got a brand new earth-shattering study coming out of Israel, which Bloomberg News described as the, quote, largest real-world analysis comparing natural immunity, end quote, that found that natural immunity is 13 times more effective than a procedure that the ruling establishment wants you to take. Yes, catching the sickness and recovering from it leaves you 13 times more prepared and stronger and healthier of an immune system response that will work 13 times more than by taking the procedure. This is, again, big breaking news that Science Mag, Bloomberg, and other media publications are actually picking up. This should be national news everywhere because the implications are huge here. If we really want to help people, This information needs to get out. This scientific study needs to be read. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be even criticized. We need to have a real life discussion about what is the right thing to do here. And sadly, those discussions are being stifled as science journalists who even talk about this are being permanently banned on Twitter, just like Alex Ranson, who was just, according to the initial accounts, permanently banned from Twitter after talking about this Israeli study. This is a very scary approach. It's also a very nonsensical one, since censoring information, stopping a conversation from taking place, isn't helping anyone, and it's creating a society.
Natural immunity means having gotten it and got over it, having an otherwise healthy immune system, having gotten it and got over it. You are then 13 times better equipped to not get sick and not transmit. If you've been following this channel for anything longer than a year, then you know that I've had to work the lowest paying job possible because it was one that did not require me to follow the obedience. And only now with my current employment, the fact that state law prohibits anyone as an employer from forcing you to prove a status in order to not have to follow the obedience protocol. And as weeks and weeks now, it's been coming out slowly and not so much being reported on, that the things I've been saying about the effectiveness and other health risks of wearing a fabric strip across your airways at all times, and regardless of what the TV doctors and spokespersons are saying, oxygen to the brain is important, especially when you're a kid. Lack of oxygen to the brain gives you brain damage. All of this is going on worldwide right now. In Australia, their army is enforcing these mandates that are not based on actual, factual science. Come here, Rick. Come here. Come here. Yeah. In Canada, they are continually opening up and locking down. Many places in Europe are opening up but requiring passports. Effectively segregating society. Some people are not able, for medical reasons, are not able to receive it. Other people, for reasons like myself, having natural immunity already, there is no reason whatsoever to take it. People like us don't get an exemption. So if you've been following this channel, you've seen for a long time what I've had to go through for speaking the truth. The limitations on my livelihood and well-being, for refusing to be oblivious and refusing to just go along with obvious falsehoods. In China, they welded people's doors shut. In New Zealand, just before this happened, they used a mass casualty event as an excuse to confiscate all firearms and begin literally policing social media with real-world consequences. Things that people who lived in New Zealand said on Facebook that disagreed with the main narrative or in any other way dissented or disproved or debunked what they were doing. They used it as an excuse to go to people's houses and confront them about their dissent and confiscate their firearms. They now live under a disarmed surveillance state with full COVID restrictions. On an island. You know anything about diseases and how they spread? Islands being isolated. There's really no point. Australia, a large island, also isolated. Many open spaces, much warm weather. Not a hospitable place for the virus. They recently had mandatory buybacks. I'm not sure about the rules in the outback, but as far as anyone in the cities go, there are no guns. Unless they were lost in a boating accident. Canada has recently or been working and significantly toward making it difficult or impossible to own a modern sporting rifle. Many countries in Europe, just unless you live in the countryside, you don't have a gun. Country by country as far as who is allowed what. Mostly in cities, it's all cities, it's high population, and if you're not in the city, then you're not necessarily going to be subject to any of the things that they do, but you are often required to venture into the city if you live outside of it, and that's the problem. So, here in America, we don't have quite the extensive lockdowns. There are some places that do. Again, against all actual fact-based science, real peer review, real studies, real world, not just hypotheticals spoken by TV doctors and government authority figures, not based in any reality. Parents are becoming upset with what the public schools are doing on several fronts. I keep mentioning this, it's happening. Their entire attempts to indoctrinate are teetering. And on top of this, you've got inept spokespeople. This is just further part of the distraction, but Jen Psaki said plandemic several days ago, and then 2 days ago was it 2 days ago? I think it was 2 days ago, on her press briefing, she meant to say hunt down whoever's responsible, and instead she dropped a C-bomb. On air. Live. Gonna hunt down the terrorists. So, got President Mumblefuck, former Vice President Joe Biden. Don't forget that part. He appears to actually be calling the shots because this is some real demented stuff they did in Afghanistan. It made absolutely no sense to do it that way, and they did it, and I cannot believe that the real world, in a non-fictional, not in a sardonic, comedic, satirical Monty Python sense of showing what would happen if you did that, but in a real world. Let me put it to you this way. In the theater of the absurd, in the realm of the deepest inside references of philosophy You have the realm of absurdism. And in the realm of absurdism, you have that which is most absurd is often most true. And for example, right now, that fly that just flew by the camera landed on the screen right here. And it sat there, and there's enough skin oil on it that this fly was just slowly sliding sideways down. What does this have to do with anything? Absurdity. How absurd that this fly did this goofy little slide while I'm talking about this. The most absurd tends to be the most true. But there's another side to it, and that is the relationship between tragedy and comedy. The relationship between tragedy and comedy is that on any fictional comedic presentation, what is presented as comedy is most often actually a tragic event if it occurred in real life. Blows to the crotch, person falls down steps and drops expensive vase. Cringe fest shows like Frasier, where they depend on the suspense of people who told a white lie and get trapped in it and spend the entire episode dancing around it. In real life, that ruins friendships. That ends relationships. On Friends, it's been shown that if you take out the laugh track and just watch the show, Ross Geller is a psychopath. So, the most tragic events of your life could be in the theater of the absurd. Hilarious comedies to other levels of existence that may be observing you as a dream or as a presentation that it considers fictional. In what I seem to perceive as reality, that I'm not dreaming, I am awake, this is the world I live in. The most popular president ever, who won by the biggest tally of votes in history, in the cleanest and fairest election, goddammit, most secure, fell asleep during a big chair meeting in front of the fireplace in the White House with the press and the Prime Minister of Israel of all countries. Just in America, they have yet to successfully confiscate weapons. The per capita ownership, because of the specificity of having a Second Amendment, not necessarily even just what it says, but the fact that it exists, is the reason why we have any freedoms whatsoever. Because there is a risk in a country where it's like 4 guns to every 1 person, and only like a little over half of people own guns. That's a lot, right? The casualties among law enforcement would be ridiculous, because while there would be some people that would just hand it over, there are other people who wouldn't. We are, as a people, as Americans, apparently very easily swayed and controlled by emotions. However, the nature of our country's culture is of independence, of freedom. In all of these other countries, they are either national cultures of obedience, in the case of China, or of, this came into my mind the other day. What was the word I was looking for? Of being subjects. Canada, Australia, most European countries. These are countries whose national identity rests in having previously or still to some extent having a monarchy, a royal family, and when you have a royal family, you are a subject of the crown, or to the crown, however you want to look at it. You are subject of the crown, subject to the decree of the crown. And when the crown and the government say do the thing, they say, okay, we do the thing. Well, Canada and Australia are independent, yes, and France doesn't have a monarchy, nor does Italy. Most other European countries do not have royal families at this time. They don't even have a crown like that. But they used to. And you can tell that the governments of these countries, and you know what though? Look at France. France is doing what France has seemingly always done. Eventually, the guillotines come out. My point is, how was it put the other night that I heard, that it's a sure sign that there's a problem with your elected government and your elected process, specifically the the process of election. When everyone that's in command is wildly unpopular, everyone who is in office is hated. And it was unfortunate to note that also the people the leadership who aren't universally hated by the people they govern are typically more authoritarian. And that is not in any way an argument toward authoritarianism. Rather that the danger of freedom is that you have to be particular, you have to be careful, you have to be meticulous, and you have to be transparent. Otherwise, it's not freedom. Because being led by deception is not freedom. Doesn't matter if you're free to choose among deceptive topics, that's not freedom. Here in America, the best thing you can do is, if you can afford it, and you should make specific steps to be able to afford it, become a legal gun owner. The more people in total that are armed, the less likely there is ever to be a successful totalitarian takeover. Because in order to secure the obedience, you must disarm the people. And if the people refuse to be disarmed, there are 350 million people in this country, and less than 5% are the ones calling shots or walking around with badges and guns or uniforms and guns. Most people in the country are not of that group by a vast majority. And of that vast majority who are not those people, about half of them own enough guns that there could be more than one gun per person if everyone got handed one. So the idea that to take these back, unless the people that have these stockpiles and caches just willingly like, oh, okay, well, you changed the law, so I guess I better do what you say. Those people, that would be how Australia went. I got to think of my family, or I don't want to lose my job, I don't want to go to prison, okay, but look at what you got. Military, martial law, lockdown, totalitarianism, authoritarianism, thought control, telling you what you can and cannot say and think. Don't give up your firearms.